Welcome to Energy Vista, a podcast on energy issues. I'm your host, Leslie Palti-Guzman. In each episode of this podcast, we will chat with energy experts from all around the world. They will tell us about their passion, inspiration, and aspiration. It's January 25th, 2019, and time for a new Energy Vista episode. Today, I'm exchanging with Sylvie Dapote. She's managing partner at Prysma Consulting. She's an expert on Latin America, oil and gas, with a special focus on Brazil and gas. She's by training an economist and an expert on regulation. Hi, Sylvie.
Hi, Leslie. A pleasure to talk to you today.
Me too. So you mentioned there is a storm in the background and we may hear some thunderstorm. I thought it was summertime in Brazil. It's common to have big storms.
Yes, it's actually rainy season in Brazil. It's very, very hot, like the 40 degrees centigrades, and it's a relief that it's actually raining because it has been dry for several weeks now. And that means that we may have problems during the rest of the year because we need water in our hydropower reservoirs to generate energy here in Brazil. So it's very good that it started raining, but when it's rain, it pours. It's too much.
Yeah, well, and good for hydro. Hi, this is Leslie here. I'm making a small parenthesis because the day we recorded the episode, there was the dam collapse, the tragic dam collapse in Brazil. So all our thoughts are for the victims, and we didn't mean to be insensitive while we were recording, but we had no idea what was going on. So we were not going to discuss about necessarily very short-term Brazil because it's hard to tell currently with the new president, Bolsonaro, what exactly will happen for the energy space and potential change. But let's focus more on the big picture and things that may happen more medium term, longer term. What's interesting to me is how Brazil illustrates the partnership also between renewable and natural gas. Many wonder right now in the energy space, what would be the role of natural gas in a low carbon economy, a greener economy, and whether natural gas will play a long-term role or just a transition role. And of course, it depends also what's going to be the usage of gas and whether we talk about power generation, city gas, industrial use, or transportation. But what really stands out for Brazil is that the country relies more than 42% on its total energy from hydro and other renewable sources, and that's growing. Wind especially is growing very fast. But at the same time, there is still a big need for natural gas and even nuclear to grow to back up those intermittents in the next decades. So that's a very interesting dimension in Brazil. Another one also is the fact that when we think about Brazil and gas, one of the first things that comes to mind is Brazil's growing domestic production from the large offshore pre-salt basin, Santos, Campos, Espírito Santo, which bring mostly associated gas. Brazil is also importing liquefied natural gas, LNG, since 2009. So first question for you, Sylvie, is Brazil's LNG import market vanishing, or on the contrary, because of the high volatility and intermittent nature of Brazil's other energy sources, LNG has a long-term role to play as a backup?
Look, LNG... well, I don't know if all the people who will hear the podcast know, but there is a lot of gas in Brazil. There is a new province that have been discovered, the pre-salt offshore Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo. So there are lots of gas reserves. But nevertheless, Brazil still needs LNG as a source of flexibility, because a lot of the gas is used in the power sector, and actually the gas power plants are used as an insurance when there is not enough water in the hydro reservoir. So a lot of the power comes from hydro. When there is not sufficient water, it will come from gas as well as other fuels as well. But for example, we have now a lot of wind, so wind will be used as much as it can, but also it's an intermittent source. So you still need thermal power plants, and they are mainly fueled with gas. So when you need gas, you need a lot of it. And when there is a lot of water in the reservoir, there is not so much demand of gas. Therefore, LNG is a source of is an important source, because our gas is mostly associated gas, so it's not that flexible. It's not at all flexible, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And so domestic gas is actually national gas is used in the sectors that have a steady demand, while in the power sector we use a lot of LNG. So
yeah. So
I think there will continue to be a need for LNG despite the growth of our production.
So you mentioned a lot of volatility in terms of LNG imports, depending on the hydro level, depending on the seasons. How do energy companies manage to meet this volatile demand? How do they need to adjust their procurements?
Well, so far the only company that's actually importing LNG is Petrobras, the the largest oil and gas company in the country, which is also providing gas to all the customers, including power plants. So Petrobras has got a big portfolio of its own production, imports from Bolivia, and LNG imports through 3 terminals. So what Petrobras does, it just buys LNG spot. It has master's agreement with 50 or 60 suppliers, and when it needs, it just makes a call and says the amount and price, negotiate the amount and price, and that the LNG is delivered. So for Petrobras, it's easy to do that. It's not very clear how other companies could manage that. A smaller company who don't have as big as a portfolio like Petrobras.
Yeah. And how many months or years away are we from seeing private players importing LNG into Brazil?
Not many months, actually. There are 2 projects, which are LNG to power projects, which should come on stream 2020 and 2021. One near Rio de Janeiro and the other one in the Northeast. So these 2 projects have been able, these are private companies who actually have developed their consortium, right, rather than companies, big consortium, which include Brazilian companies and large companies, large international companies, including LNG suppliers. So they've been able to negotiate a supply of energy which is highly flexible. And of course, flexibility comes at a price. So probably this LNG, this flexible LNG is a lot more expensive than firm LNG in other contracts.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that in Brazil, it seems that LNG gas is a good complement to renewables and as a backup. In many countries, governments are wondering, will gas be this kind of partner with renewables, or another fuel will replace gas or leapfrog to something else? So it seems that Brazil is a good illustration, actually, that both gas and renewable are can be part of the same energy mix and work together.
Well, Brazil has got one of the highest percentage of renewable energy in its mix, and not only in the power mix because of the hydropower, which is about 85% of generation, but also in the overall energy mix, because Brazil uses a lot of biomass and biomass fuel. We use a lot of ethanol and now increasingly a lot of biodiesel. And there are lots of power plants also that use bagasse. So we have a very high proportion of renewable energy. Gas is a much younger form of energy in Brazil, and it comes as a cleaner complement to the renewable part, because actually we have oil. Brazil has a lot of oil, but it's used in transport mainly, and for other uses like domestic use or industrial use, it has nearly all been substituted by gas, which is cleaner, easier to use, etc. We've got a little bit of coal as well in the south. It's not a very good coal, but it can be burned on the top of the mine. So that provides some electricity as well. But the big share is actually of renewable is hydropower in power, increasingly wind as well. Wind is increasing part. It's not that big yet, but there is a lot of a very high growth and a lot of prospects. Except that wind is also an intermittent source. So if you have two intermittent sources like hydro, which has got some intermittence because there are large reservoirs, but nowadays these reservoirs are not multi-months, multi-year as they used to be. Now they deplete much faster because demand have grown and the reservoir have not grown at the same pace. So they deplete much faster. So you need to have some type of insurance that you will have energy, electricity provided when you don't have water. And if at that moment you also don't have wind, and the intermittency of wind is much more on the daily type of intermittency. So anyway, it's very useful to have a clean source of thermal energy. And so I think gas is I mean, is seen as a transition fuel in many countries. And I think it's going to be a very long transition in Brazil because we already have a lot of renewable, and gas has come to fill in a very useful purpose in the country.
Right. Yeah. So the share of gas demand may increase in Brazil, but not necessarily the share of LNG imports because of domestic production.
Look, no, in reality, if we talk about non-power demand of gas, it hasn't increased a lot, and that has to do more with the economics than with anything. The growth happened. Industrial demand hasn't grown in the last 6-7 years, but that has to do with the lack of economic growth. In the residential sector, it's a warm country, so we use very little gas, and we use gas in the cars. Here we have a lot of CNG cars, or they're actually CNG and gasoline. So that used to be bigger than now. It's lesser now, but you have to think that in Brazil we also have ethanol for cars. So it's kind of a competition between three fuels. And then the main prospect for quick growth, but which is not a steady growth, is like quick growth in capacity is in the power sector. But the fact that capacity is growing doesn't mean that the use is high all the time. You can have months where you just don't dispatch any of the power plants, the gas-fired power plants, and then suddenly you've got a few days, weeks, or sometimes a few months, depending on if we have El Nino or La Nina, whatever. You can even have a few months of 100% dispatch of the power plant, and that makes a huge difference in demand.
Much since I started covering gas, LNG, I heard about pre-salt in Brazil and big plans of floating export plants. Where does that stand now? And are we ever going to see Brazil exporting its gas? I mean, there is no shortage of gas globally. The key is how to monetize it, and there is a lot of competition, cheaper sources of gas. So first, I think that Brazil will use it for its own domestic use. But do you see any regional export or more global export of gas from Brazil?
Well, first of all, you need to consider the cost of liquefying the gas and probably liquefying it offshore because that's where the reserves are. And then, you need to see, you rightly mentioned, there is a lot of gas. You need to see how much the market, a foreign market, we pay for the gas. So all in all, if you do the net back to the production, it's much, much better to sell the gas in Brazil. The demand for gas is really incipient. There is a large territory, no pipeline, so there is a lot to be developed in Brazil. And I think there are some regulatory issues, and in particular, some inconsistencies between the natural gas and the power sector that need to be solved. Like the power sector wants total flexibility, and natural gas doesn't like flexibility because it needs to make a large investment and to develop fields, and you cannot do that if you don't have a firm contract, especially if you have associated gas, as is the case in the pre-salt. So there are many problems to be solved, but I think the potential market, it's closer, is here in Brazil. Whether it could be regional exports through sort of smaller LNG boats, that's a good a possibility with the rapidly changing technology and lower cost of floating
smaller
scale LNG
Mm-hmm.
and lower cost of floating LNG. It could be, but when a few years ago, we're talking about 5-6 years ago, when the pre-salt was discovered, Petrobras made some evaluation of how much floating liquefaction would cost. They decided that it wasn't economic, at least not in the context of current prices and competition with other sources.
Yeah, and it seems that other countries in the region, neighbor to Brazil, such as Argentina, have also a lot of reserves and are considering exports. So definitely in the area over there, there is no shortage of gas.
No, there is no shortage of gas, but you know, I mean, I'm a bit skeptic about the possibilities of Argentina to become an exporter or a substantial exporter again.
In the short term, in the 2020 plus.
I would say even until 2030, because Argentina has got its own very large demand. It's a mature market, and demand has been repressed in the last few years. There has been cuts and substitutions of gas with oil products and other things like that, and it still imports quite a lot from Bolivia. So it's a long way, I think, before Argentina becomes an exporter again. And the other thing is, Venezuela's got huge reserve. The largest reserves of the hemisphere are in Venezuela, and we all know that they haven't been able to develop this reserve for a long time. So because of above the ground problems, political, regulatory, and price issue, etc.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think for the government in Argentina to announce the release of one of the FSRU, which is a big expense for the country, but I think to release one of them a few months ago was maybe too early, too premature.
I think they have now reached the point where they might need to import LNG mainly in the summer. So the LNG facility, the FSRU, might be called back in winter. It could be the case, but in summer they have probably enough capacity with the one they have closer to Buenos Aires, and yes, they wanted to cut costs. It's really expensive for them. So yeah, I think they will get to the point with the increasing non-conventional gas production in Argentina. They will get to the point where they are able to supply the minimum demand, which is summer demand, and then a little more maybe. Right. But they will still need imports of LNG in the winter. Not because they couldn't reach that level. They might be able to reach that level, but it may not make sense economically to actually have all your supply, your production and supply system geared at supplying the winter peak, there's very large difference between summer and winter, 1-7. So it's very, very large.
Yes.
In the domestic sector and even in the industrial sector, there is some variability.
Yeah, I agree. Great. Well, Sylvie, let's move to our next section, which is your professional trajectory. So you study economics, but you lived in many different countries. How do you think that influenced your decision to go into the energy sector?
I think I got to the energy sector a little bit by chance. Not because I've lived in many countries, but after I finished my economics degree in Italy, I wanted to do a master's degree in the UK, and I needed to choose the course. And there was this course that was multidisciplinary, which interested me a lot, which was about economics, energy, and the environment. And I didn't want to continue to be just an economist. I wanted to widen my knowledge and my industry knowledge as well. So I went into energy. It seems like the easiest area that was offered there for an economist. All the other areas of water pollution, etc., were for scientists. And I never left. I got fascinated by energy and its connection with our life and with the development of the countries, how important it
Yeah.
is for the economics and for the life of the people. And
Yeah. So you worked a little bit for the International Energy Agency, and then for the regulator in the UK, and then you moved to Brazil, right? And you worked for big consulting companies.
More or less. I immediately after I finished my degree in the UK, I worked for a consulting company, and that's where I got the taste of consulting. I think consulting is
Yeah.
incredible if you are that type of person. You need to be very curious, very self-driving, and you need to like to study and to have challenges, different challenges every year. So I got the bug in the UK as soon as I finished my degree, and then I was called to work at the International Energy Agency. This is actually in Paris, and it's a fascinating place because there are people from many nationalities which are working there on policy and regulatory issues. So that was a little bit like being a consultant or even an academic, but working for governments, not working for private companies. And then when that period ended,
Yeah.
because at the International Energy Agency you can only stay 5 years, I went back to consulting, and I did some independent
Yeah.
consulting for the regulator in Italy, and then I went to Brazil. I was fascinated by Latin America. I wrote a book on natural gas in Latin America, so I had lots of contacts
Oh.
there. And at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
Argentina was a mess with a big recession and big
Yeah.
political problems. So I went to Brazil and I learned Portuguese, and I
Yeah.
established myself as a consultant there. And after a few
Yeah.
years as an independent consultant, I joined a large consulting company, actually called at the time CIRA, and then IHS CIRA.
Yeah.
And then I went
Yeah.
on to being a partner of a medium-sized Brazilian consulting company. And now, 5 years since in the last 5 years, I've actually have my own consulting company, and we are three partners in the consulting company. So I've actually done the
Yeah.
big, the
Well.
medium, and the small, the international, and the org, and
Mhm.
everything. But I've always been a consultant. Basically, I've never actually worked in a company in a energy company like the big ones,
Yeah.
Total, BP.
Yeah, and you were telling me that what you like the most about consulting is that you feel you're studying all the time. Like you can learn on the spot a topic that you had never heard before, like in 2 days, 1 week, and become an expert in the field.
Hopefully not. I like when I get recurrent recurrent demands, because you can actually
Yeah,
work on things, and get better. But yes, I mean that's the thing about consulting, is that there is no project is the same as the other, no client is the same as the other. So every day is different, and you have the opportunity to study in depth, and you also have the
yeah,
opportunity to see how your work make a difference. And I've seen that from very young. I started consulting just after my master degree, and I could see how what I
yeah,
was studying and and um, writing and was important for the client. And that's something, you get the bag and you never stop.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't mean that you would become an expert on something random that you very remote to your expertise, but like sometimes you can accept offers from a client on a topic that you may not necessarily know by heart or that you've studied in depth, but you can do it because it's you have the skills, and you did it before for other topics, and you can. there are different subsector of a
Yes,
sector, right? Like
or
for gas, for
yeah, the
instance.
other
Yeah.
thing is you need to find ways to solve a problem, to respond to a question. So you might know it, but you might not exactly know how you will get to it. So it's like it's very creative, actually. You develop a methodology to answer certain questions. And
Yeah.
and that methodology is specific to that problem, or maybe later on you can apply it to something else. But it's actually, I find it
Hmm.
very, very creative.
Yeah. Yeah. No, same here, and never the same. I agree. So let's talk a little bit about your personal path now. So you told me also that when you were working for a large consulting company, you were working a lot and maybe too much, and that may have led you also to start your own company so that you are your own boss and you decide on your hours.
Yeah, I think it's very important, especially if you're a woman and if you're a mother. I've got a young daughter; she's 12 right now. Um, to actually get a balance between your professional life and your personal life. I'm a workaholic. I'm an
Hmm.
assumed workaholic. I love my work. So I would work if
Yeah.
I'm asked for. I would work all hours on a project, and but I needed to do something different. The other thing is about rewards. It's for me as a person. It's important to that efforts are actually related to the rewards. So if I have a large project, I will work all hours, but I will have a large reward, a large revenue at the end of the month or at the end of the year. And in the periods, because consultancy is a very up and down business, in the periods where there is uh, fewer projects or less well-paying projects, and I will have more time for myself. Well, that also will be good, and I will be able to dedicate more time to my family. So I like this sort of. It's actually, this uncertainty is good for me. I like when I have lots of work, and I like when I have less work.
Hmm.
And yeah, and
Yeah.
this.
And I like
Yeah,
to
go
think,
ahead.
yeah, I think it's good to think it. I think it's good to think it that way, that having a work life balance is not necessarily every day the same balance. Like you may have more work for a week, for a month, and then you adjust and you compensate with less work a month after. Or as you said, depending on the client work, client demand, it's more intense or less
Yes,
intense.
and I can give you an example of that. The first 6 months of 2018, actually from late to 2017, I've had so much work that I've missed all weekends, all holidays with my family, and Christmas, New Year, everything. I was working like crazy. And came
Yeah.
July, I took 1 month holiday traveling in France with my daughter. It was magic. It was really rewarding,
Yeah.
and I was very happy to do that. And if I had had a normal job, I would have never been able to take one full
Hmm.
month of holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great. And so I wanted to ask you also, I know your husband is a professor and also an energy expert. How is it to have, like, as a partner, somebody that has kind of the same expertise as you? Do you feel you help each other, or do you sometimes compete between each other? How is the
No, it's.
relation in terms of like professionally?
I
Yeah.
think because of the kind of person he is, we have a very collaborative life, both professional and personal. So, in our work, he's a professor, but he does also lots of consulting. We don't compete for clients because it is in university, so he works more for institutions and government institution. I work more for private clients, but very often we
Yeah.
we collaborate. So he needs some help on a project, I will do some small part or big part of his project and help, and vice versa. He's been helping me a lot when I had lots large project or many projects at the same time. I need to beef up my team, so he comes in, and some of his students also comes in the project team, and so that's very useful, and it's very rewarding. I really admire him, and he admires me. So we are on the
Yeah.
yeah, very
Great.
balanced in our.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, winning team. That's great. Very good to hear. Well, so that's concludes our exchange. Sylvie, thank you so much for making yourself available and sharing so spontaneously. You know, good tips, good advice for all of us. And yeah, I think your consulting path is could inspire many other people. So thank you for
Thank
sharing
you,
that.
Leslie. It was great to talk with you today.
Yeah, same here. This concludes our Energy Vista podcast. It was recorded on January 25th, 2019. This is Leslie Palti-Guzman saying good day and good luck.